According to Fender, a staggering 90% of new guitarists abandon their instrument within the first year of playing, which is just crazy. If you're a beginner guitarist that's struggling to see progress, or an intermediate guitarist that's just looking to improve their playing habits, then this video is for you. So let's break down the barriers that could be holding you back from developing a level of proficiency that you can be proud of. And to help us do that, I'll be talking through 8 things that I wish I knew as a beginner guitarist that will help you to learn faster, more efficiently, and to have more fun doing so. Human behaviour follows the law of least effort. As new players, we will naturally gravitate to the path that requires the least amount of work. So in order to stay on our chosen path, we need to make it easy for ourselves. This is very much an out of sight, out of mind situation. For example, don't keep your guitar in its case gathering dust under your bed. Chances are you're never going to actually take it out and play it. Instead, keep it where you can see it. Keep it on a stand in your bedroom or in the living room, or hung up on a wall somewhere in your house where it's visible. By doing this, chances are you'll see it when you walk into that room, you'll pick it up and you'll actually play it, which will lead to more practicing and improvement in the long term. To see improvements fast, consistency is king. It really is that simple. And that's why it's so important to form a habit. Now, picking up a guitar whenever you feel like it is fine, but that school of thought is never going to lead to the significant improvements in your playing ability that you're hoping to see. Now, when I started playing, I really struggled to stay consistent until I suddenly realised that the more attractive I made the activity of playing, the more likely it was that I would form the habit. James Clear puts it well in his book Atomic Habits: tiny changes, remarkable results, especially over long periods. And he states in his book that just like the principle of compound interest when investing in stocks and shares, habits are very much the compound interest of self-improvement in many ways. This is why over long periods of time, small habits can make a big difference. And there are lots of techniques that you can employ to make sure that you actually stick to those habits. For example, I have a rule where I can't actually go for dinner in the evening once I've done my 15 minutes of practice every day. If you're living with friends, family, if you've got a roommate, ask them to be your accountability partner. There are all sorts of techniques, and James Clear goes into this in his book at the macro level. So for anyone looking for more tips and tricks on how to stay consistent, I'd recommend reading his book. It's great. Now, when I first started playing the guitar, my guitar teacher made me learn songs that I didn't even enjoy or like listening to, never mind playing. Now, I have no idea why guitar teachers do this, but they just seem to bore the living daylights out of their students. Now, as part of my learning, I was doing the grades, and as part of doing the grades, you have a curriculum where you have to learn songs and scales that maybe you don't get the most enjoyment out of. And I totally acknowledge that the curriculum includes these for a reason. They help you diversify your playing ability and improve as an all-rounder. But I just wasn't getting much enjoyment out of doing those things. So for me, it was really important to offset the work I had to do for those grades with songs that I wanted to play, songs that I actually loved. And the feeling that you get from learning and nailing a song that's one of your favourites is just a great feeling. And so for anybody getting a bit bogged down in having to learn scales and other things that you might not be that interested in, try to balance that with some songs that you actually enjoy learning, and you'll see improvements in both areas. Now, I know that feeling all too well. The frustration, the anger of playing for literally hours trying to get a section of a solo or a lick correct, and for whatever reason, it's just not working on the day. What I didn't realise at the time was that playing guitar for hours can be very taxing, not just physically on the fingers, but mentally also. And so if you can't get a chord right or a lick right, you can't get it to sound correctly, rather than spending hours burning yourself out, getting worked up, getting stressed, just leave it. Come back to it the next day, spend 15 minutes practicing it again, come back to it the day after and the day after, and over the course of that week, a couple of weeks, you will see an improvement. Why is this? It's because when you sleep at night, REM sleep actually consolidates that procedural learning that you did during the day. It actually commits the new moves that you learned in your fingers into muscle memory. This is why it's way more effective to practice in 10 to 15 to 20 minute blocks every day consistently versus waiting until the end of the week and blocking out 2 hours on a Sunday to practice. Now, I used to do that, and when I made this change, I saw drastic improvements very quickly. Now, when people say that timing is everything, that's not hyperbole. Timing really is everything. Here's a question for you. What's the best way to sound good when you've only got a limited number of chords or riffs in your repertoire? Really simple. Play them well, play them in time. Now, I'd recommend investing in a metronome. They're pretty cheap, or even better still, download a free metronome app off your phone and use that to practice to. Alternatively, you could even go one step further and record yourself playing guitar in Logic Pro or GarageBand or another DAW of your choice and play along to a click track. Now, whipping out the metronome, I get it, doesn't sound like the most exciting or enjoyable thing to do, but it's a necessary part of developing your inner sense of rhythm and timing so that going forward it comes out naturally in your playing. Now we all know that guitarists are a little bit obsessed with tone. We're constantly on the floor twiddling knobs, making things sound good. And if your tone is dialed in, if your volume levels are set correctly, and if your guitar is playing nicely, you're just going to have a much better time. Find settings that work for you and set them, so that every time you come back to practice, you don't have to spend ages dialing in the right sounds. But it's important to invest time up front in dialing in those sounds that you want to hear, so that every time you come to pick the guitar up, you have a great experience. If you give care to the sounds that you're making, and more importantly, like what you hear, you're just going to keep coming back for more, trust me. Now, as musicians, we typically don't like hearing our playing in isolation. We want to hear our guitar in context within a song or as part of a wider section of instruments. That's why I would recommend playing along to your favourite songs, or even better still, investing in a loop pedal. Now, I'm not saying you should go full Ed Sheeran on this thing, but make your own backing track using simple chords and challenge yourself to come up with lead lines that fit nicely against these chords. And the great thing about this method of playing is that you're developing your lead playing ability as well as your rhythm playing ability. And over time, you'll start to learn which of these chord patterns work well together and which of these chord patterns are being used time and time again by your favourite artists. And you'll also start to develop a sense of which lead parts work on which chord patterns. And most importantly, have fun listening to the sounds work well together and create a sound that's greater than the sum of its parts. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, this 8th and final tip is probably the one that resonates with me the most. And this is something that I didn't really give much thought to be honest, early on when I was starting to learn guitar. But when I eventually bought the equipment and started recording myself and eventually making music at home, I found the entire experience and process to be game-changing, quite frankly. So much so that I actually ended up teaching myself how to produce music at home. Link in the bio if you feel like checking some of that stuff out. Now, I personally find that when I'm playing, I find it very difficult to kind of step back and analyse myself. I don't really notice any mistakes that I make. I can't tell if I'm playing in time correctly, but when I first recorded myself playing guitar, I found it to be a very similar experience when I first recorded myself singing. When you're singing in real time, you're like, yeah, this sounds okay, it's sort of pretty much on pitch, yeah, I think it sounds pretty decent. And then when you hear yourself back, you're like, oh dear, dearie me, do I really sound like this? And to think that other people have heard me do this, that's not good at all. That is not good at all. And for me, this is one of the best ways where you can spot areas for improvement. You get instant feedback on your playing. So there you have it. Even if you're recording yourself on iPhone voice notes or whatever, record yourself playing, listen to it back, and you will have spotted things that you would never have usually spotted. It's pretty game changing. Now, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful and informative, you'll be pleased to know that this is not the end. Next week, I have another video coming which will cover 8 more things that I wish I knew as a beginner guitarist. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, buttons just down there, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the second episode. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you in a bit. Section 2. Section 2. Someone's bloody car alarm.